everybody. So we went through the book of Jonah, and Jonah was a prophet to the city of Nineveh, and at that time Nineveh repented. It's interesting to consider because Jonah was a foreshadow of Christ. That's pretty apparent through the whole of his book, with the imagery presented, especially the 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Very close resemblance to Jesus and to the gospel message, to what Jesus came to do, which was to snatch out of the hands of death and to offer life to, which was what he did with Jonah by having the whale swallow him, so he didn't drown in the sea. So it's a story about salvation, about the sinfulness of man, God's grace demonstrated toward man, and the salvific capacity of God. Specifically, through Jesus and through the cross, Jesus is mentioned 2 different times in the book of Jonah. Specifically in chapter 2, where Jonah is expressing gratitude and thanksgiving for not dying, and he said, salvation belongs to the Lord. Salvation is of the Lord, and that is in Jonah 2:9. And then in Jonah 4:11, where Jonah is upset that Nineveh repented and was spared, Jesus said, well, you were happy about the gourd and sad when the gourd got destroyed, so why are you not happy when Nineveh doesn't get destroyed? Kind of a weird situation there. But basically calling out that people need someone to help them when they have no ability to discern. They don't have any knowledge, therefore no understanding, no wisdom to apply, no experience, no nothing to help them. People who cannot discern their right hand from their left. And that's also a reference to Jesus because the right hand of God is Christ in the Old Testament. Right hand, right arm, arm, hand, they're all different ways of talking about Jesus, specifically in the Psalms, but also in Isaiah comes to mind. It's all over, actually. It's all over the Old Testament. Jesus is called the right arm, the right hand, arm of God. And in Revelation 5 also. So Jesus specifically is referenced twice in the book of Jonah, twice. And it's important to understand that Jonah is a foreshadow of Christ and his salvific power. It is a foreshadow of the gospel message. Now, at that point, Nineveh was not destroyed. In the book of Nahum, Nineveh will be destroyed. And this, I will say, is one of the challenges with doing Bible study, not using some of the commentaries that are out there. There is obviously a comfort level that exists with looking at history and finding similarities in the Old Testament prophets to what happened in history, and foregoing the link to prophecy, meaning relationship to second coming. The foreword in my Bible is a stark proof of this. And so after I read the foreword in my Bible, I looked for some data online to tell me when the book of Nahum was written. And it was written, it is believed to have been written in like a 50-year period between 663 BC, which has something to do with Egypt and the fall of Thebes, which is mentioned in here. And then the fall of the Assyrian Empire in 612 BC. Yeah, 612 BC was when the Assyrian Empire fell to the Babylonian Empire. And this also has links to the 7 heads in Revelation 17 and the imagery that's described. These 7 heads were 7 kings. 5 had fallen, 1 was, 1 would come, would continue a short space, and the beast of Revelation 13 and 17 is the 8th even of the 7 and shall go into perdition. Those 7 heads, kings that had come prior to the 8th, the beast of Revelation, is Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and Medo-Persia and Greece and the Roman Empire, and then one that would come after, maybe the Ottoman, not sure. It's up to speculation of what the 7th was, and then the 8th obviously will be the one from Revelation. But the Assyrian Empire, there's some challenging things regarding that because the Assyrian Empire was responsible for the fall of the house of Israel. After Solomon died, his sons Rehoboam and Jeroboam divided the kingdom between the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And the northern kingdom of Israel was dispersed into the nations by the Assyrians circa 712, 722, something like that BC. I could go look it up, but there's no point. You can go look it up too. But the Assyrian Empire is who scattered the northern kingdom of Israel into the nations circa 722 or 712 BC, somewhere around there. And then the southern kingdom of Israel, the house of Judah, fell to the Babylonian Empire circa 586 BC, which was in that third and final exile of the Babylonian captivity. Zedekiah was the last of the Judaic kings on the throne. The next will be Jesus. So the Assyrian Empire was pivotal to a lot of the books of history and prophecy also. Nineveh was the capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So Nineveh is like it's talking about when you're talking about the burden of Damascus. Well, Damascus is the capital of Syria. So when you're talking about the burden of the capital city, that's telling you that the nation has fallen. So that's kind of the thing with Damascus, is it's the capital of the country of Syria now. It would have been related to other empires also. But Nineveh is also a capital city. It would have been the capital of the Assyrian Empire. So when you're saying the burden of Nineveh, you're talking about the demise of a kingdom. Now, where I think that this is interesting to pull from is when you're talking about the Assyrian Empire, obviously, yes, you're talking about something that happened in the past. And again, you go to Revelation, you're talking about it being one of the seven heads, the second of the seven, actually, because you go Egypt and Assyria, Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome, one more, and then the eighth, who is the Revelation 13 midpoint guy. Beast one from Revelation 13. But as I have stated, and I wrote about this in my Revelation study, and I talked about this in the book of Jonah too when I was setting up some stuff for it, the beast in Revelation 13, we're told that he is given the appearance of a deadly head wound. Well, that's because he's an angel and he can't die. So the two witnesses who he has the skirmish with are given power to kill those who come against them in the same manner. Obviously, an angel can't be killed, which is why he's given the appearance of a deadly head wound. But when you take that imagery into Revelation 17, it says, well, his heads were actually seven other empires. So it's like, is there an association with one of the previous seven that this eighth also has? And yes, he's called the Assyrian twice in the Assyrian in the Old Testament. In Micah 5, this man shall be the peace when the Assyrian shall come into our land. This is actually the book right before Nahum. So it's like on the page right before. But Micah 5 is talking about the birth of Jesus, one of the prophecies of the birth of Jesus, and how Jesus would be set against the Assyrian. He would see to the Assyrian's demise. Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth have been of old from everlasting. Therefore he will give them up until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. That's talking about the end of the 70th week, naturally. And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord and the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide. For now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man shall be the peace, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then we shall raise up against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. They shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod and the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. The remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people, as a dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass, that tarrieth not for a man, nor waiteth for the sons of man. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who if he go through, both tread down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. So that's talking about the remnant of Israel at the end of the 70th week. They're going to come to saving grace. Jesus is going to come back. He's going to put the Assyrian down, and then Israel is going to go back into her land and be among the nations in kingdom. So the Assyrian is actually a reference to the beast of Revelation. And there's one more. I want to say Isaiah 14. Yes. And that is the other one. I thought so. Isaiah. So the link to Assyria is actually fascinating because not only is it historical, but it's also prophetic. Not necessarily to the kingdom of Assyria, but the beast in Revelation 13 is going to be called the Assyrian. Jesus is going to defeat him. So when you're looking at Nahum and the burden of Nineveh, which was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and that Nineveh is talked about in other prophets as being destroyed in one of the cities of the nations that falls in conjunction with the second coming, there's a lot of fascinating stuff. So when like the foreword of my Bible, reading this book, links it only to history, I'm like, but no, it's fascinating. So we have in here the, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. That is not. And there might be other references. I've got a couple here in Isaiah 10. I haven't looked at those recently. So there are other ones, but I'm just looking at the ones that I am immediately familiar with. Start in verse 24 of Isaiah 14. The Lord of hosts has sworn, saying, surely as I thought, so shall it come to pass. As I have purposed, so shall it stand, that I will break the Assyrian in my land, and under my mountains tread him underfoot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched upon all the nations. For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, who shall disannul it, and his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? Yes, his hand is stretched out. Jesus. Like I said, the hand, the arm, the right hand, the right arm of God is a name of, it's a reference to Jesus all over the Old Testament. When you understand that and you see the references, it puts it in a whole new light. So if you are looking for some kind of Bible study to do, just go look at the occurrences of right arm, right hand, hand, arm in those contexts when it's talking about deliverance or defeat of enemies and things like that. And it's going to be referenced to Jesus. It's actually quite fascinating. So anyway, when we're talking about Nineveh, Nahum, the Assyrian, that was the other thing I wanted to look at, Nineveh. So let's look and see where it's in. So it's the city Nineveh is actually referenced 17 times in the Bible. Once in Matthew 12. And that was just comparing the times of Jesus to the times of Jonah. But 16 times in the Old Testament. Genesis, 2 Kings are beyond the scope of this. Sennacherib, talking about the actual Assyrian Empire in Isaiah 37, there's a reference to Nineveh. In Jonah, obviously, there's 8 references because that's where he was. In Nahum, there are 3 because it's talking about the burden of Nineveh, which is the destruction of Nineveh. And in Zephaniah 1. Zephaniah 2, rather, there is 1 reference. Now, this is actually how we can definitively say that the destruction of Nineveh, the burden of Nineveh, has relationship to the end times. If you were unclear about that from any other reference, which you shouldn't be, because there are references to the Assyrian. Again, Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, so it will not be done totally until Jesus comes back to put an end to it. And we looked at some of those references that link the Assyrian to the beast, which Jesus defeats at his second coming in Revelation 19. So it's all very circular. Not saying that there aren't historical ties, but there are also prophetic ties, and these are not mutually exclusive. The one reference where I will say, and this is before I get into the actual book of Nahum, but I wanted to set up this understanding and kind of the backstory, is that we're not only dealing with history here. And it will be made clear that we're not only dealing with history as we read through it. It's a 3-chapter book. Zephaniah 2. This is the clearest you are going to get, probably, that Nineveh is linked, the destruction of Nineveh is linked to the second coming of Christ. Zephaniah 2:1. Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day passes chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be that you shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. Now, the Lord is good. The Lord is good, because I totally forgot about the Psalm 83 link I was going to talk about. Being hidden in the day of the Lord's anger is a reference to the remnant. This is the Isaiah 26, come my people. My people, Isaiah 26. Isaiah's my people was Israel. When he says, come my people, enter thou into thy chambers and shut the door behind thee, as it were a little while, for the Lord's going to come out of his place and judge the inhabitants of the earth. That's a reference to the second coming. That is a reference to the hiding thyself from the face of his anger at the second coming. This is specifically what Zephaniah is. There are two sister passages. I'm getting excited. Sorry. I love talking about the Bible. I love Bible study. It's fun. It's fun. And all the links and all the references is just fun. Anyway, Isaiah. This is one of those things that people keep bringing up as related to the rapture of the church. It is not. It is not remotely related to the rapture of the church. It is Isaiah talking to his people. When Jesus returns at the second coming, they are going to be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger, hidden in Christ. This is specifically what Jesus was talking to the religious leaders about in Matthew 23, where he said, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee. How often I would have gathered her children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings. This is, I would have hid you in the day of my anger, but ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. That is exactly what it's talking about. Jesus said he's going to hide them. He's going to protect them from his indignation. That's what hiding thyself in the chambers is about, is under the protective covering of the Lord. It's not literal, it's figurative language for believing in the Lord Jesus Christ to be saved spiritually, yes, but then literally, physically, in the day of his fierce anger, when he comes back to literally, physically judge those people who stand against him. You don't want to be against him at that time. So in Zephaniah 1, seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be that ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. Yes, like under his wings. This is what Isaiah is talking about in Isaiah 26. We have been with child, we have been in pain. We have, as it were, brought forth wind. We have not wrought any deliverance in the earth, neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen. Thy dead men shall live together, with my dead body shall they arise. That's the Old Testament saints' resurrection, which is after Jesus returns at the second coming, per Daniel 12. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust, for they dew is as the dew of the herbs, the earth shall cast out the dead. Again, that's a reference to the Old Testament saints' resurrection. Come my people, Israel. This is a reference to the living remnant at the time that Jesus returns at the second coming. Enter thou into thy chambers and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself in the protective nature of Christ. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment until the indignation be overpassed. Yeah, because Jesus is leaving heaven to tread the winepress and slay everyone with the breath of his lips. You don't want to be on that side of it. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood and shall no more cover her slain. So what ties this all together is a third reference that also includes Asher, which is where the Assyrian Empire came from. Nineveh, related to Asher and Assyria, is a culminating of God's victory over his enemies in Psalm 83. All of these are linked together. We just have to move through the Old Testament to find the linkages. But in Psalm 83 it says, keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult. It's not enemies of Israel, it's enemies of God that use Israel to get at God because they cannot get at God themselves. They that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people Israel, consulted against thy hidden ones. Now that's a reference to trying to cut the remnant off from being preserved so that the name of Israel is no more in remembrance. This is specifically one of the greatest ways in which the grace of God is going to be demonstrated during the 70th week, is because there will be a remnant preserved according to the election of grace, so that the name of Israel cannot be cut off from remembrance. This is a reference to the midpoint of the 70th week, the flight of the remnant, and how some of the nations are going to try to stop Israel from doing that. One of the next things I'll talk about is actually the prophecy against Edom for doing that. Edom tried to stop his brother Jacob from fleeing. Edom is going to be escape out of the hand of the beast during the beast's reign of terror, because Jesus is going to clean up shop on them himself. And that's in Numbers 24. It's in Daniel 11 toward the end of the chapter, and it's in the book of Obadiah and in Joel also. Edom is going to be a waste, and Jesus is going to make it so. Nobody else gets the honor of that but Jesus, because Edom does wrong to Jacob during their flight, and then goes in to spoil Israel during the second half of the 70th week, which is what Daniel 11:39 talks about. So the hidden ones are the remnant of Israel that they meaning everyone who hates Israel at the midpoint of the 70th week, tries to not allow them to flee. It's by Michael stands up, the great prince that standeth for the children of thy people, and gets them. He's the wings of the great eagle that takes them into their place, where they will be nourished for a time times half a time from the face of the serpent, because it's Satan and the beast and the false prophet and all of the armies of all of these people that are trying to get to Israel and kill them, and God will not allow it. That's the meaning of hidden ones. It's a reference to the remnant. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. Again, that's a specific reference to the flight of Israel during the midpoint of the 70th week. For they have consulted together, they are with one consent, they are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about after this. Ishmaelites, Moab, Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. They have hope in the children of Lot, Selah. So, having said all that, while I do understand that probably a lot of the commentaries will tell you that the book of Nahum is history related to the fall of the Assyrian Empire post Jonah, because they repented and then they went back to evil, and so God destroyed the Assyrian Empire via Babylon, is a true statement that there was a historical end to the Assyrian Empire. It is not a true statement that there aren't prophetic implications with that also, and this is where we get to the book of Nahum. So, it is entirely possible that I'm going to do a part 2, but I wanted to do a bunch of setup work. Actually, that's probably what I'm going to do, is I'm going to do a second video for this after doing all of the setup work and kind of bringing it full circle and helping us understand kind of where we're at. But I'm going to end this video by reading the foreword of this book. And then in the part 2, I will actually go through the 3-chapter book. And I will take some opportunities to talk about how we see relationship to the second coming throughout this, because I don't want to make this too long. But this is fascinating to me. That's why I love studying prophecy so much, is because it requires you to jump all around the Bible, and you learn so much about all of these other books and contexts and history, prophecy. It's fascinating to me. It's so fun. I hope you guys have fun studying it too. So anyway, this is the foreword that my Bible gives for the book of Nahum. And this is kind of what, as I was reading through it and then I read this, I'm like, yeah, it's not entirely complete, but it's interesting. Nahum, the book of Nahum. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. Luke 12:48. Nineveh had been given the privilege of knowing the one true God. Under Jonah's preaching, this great Gentile city had repented, and God had graciously stayed his judgment. However, 100 years later, Nahum proclaims the downfall of this same city. The Assyrians had forgotten their revival and have returned to their habits of violence, idolatry, and arrogance. As a result, Babylon will so destroy the city that no trace of it will remain, a prophecy fulfilled in painful detail. The Hebrew word Nahum means comfort or consolation, is a shortened form of Nehemiah, which means comfort of Yahweh. The destruction of the capital city of Assyria is a message of comfort and consolation to Judah and all who live in fear of the cruelty of the Assyrians. The title of this book in the Greek and Latin Bibles is Nahum. This actually plays into, and I'll have to look at this because off the top of my head, I started going through the book of Isaiah and then I stopped going through it because it was really, really long. I think I got into the 40s of the chapters going through the book. But some of the early chapters talk about how the house of Judah witnessed the destruction of the house of Israel from the Assyrians, and they were scared of the same thing. But I will look that up too, so we can reference that. But that is the lead into this book. So there's much to come. Hopefully, if you guys had some of the questions about some of the other stuff I mentioned, that has been clarified, or you can go read some of the corresponding scripture passages I gave you to study that out further for yourselves. I'm going to look up the Isaiah portion of this, talk about in the part 2, and then we will go through this book. It is interesting. It's pretty fascinating. But in the meantime, if you have questions, let me know. I'll see you guys later.